Hi, I'm Jen, and welcome to Republican Roundtable. Tonight we're going to be getting into issues that will be facing us up in this 2024 election year, and also for our futures, for our children's future and our children's future. With us tonight is Cristine Trooien.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And you just have a background, a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited for this.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm always happy to talk about this project. It's really a labor of love that I have sort of birthed in the last 18 months to 2 years.
It's become your project, your thing. But first of all, who are you, and how did you even get involved in?
Well, I'm Cristine Trooien, and I'm just a parent. I often will introduce myself that way. I think that is really at the heart of this mission, is trying to empower people with no qualifications or seemingly somebody who thinks that they have no business engaging in like local politics or even the education realm. You're fully qualified if you're a parent to do this work of organizing and getting involved at your local level.
And I never want to say you're just a parent, but
but I think that's motivating, because I think that is the common thread amongst the parent movement now, has become this like phenomenon. I think ever since around 2021, when parents started showing up at school board meetings and realizing that previously we really felt like if there's ever a problem, they'll listen to us, right? We can go to the board,
Absolutely.
And if we have concerns, that's how we're gonna work together. And they quickly realized that as soon as they were raising their concerns, they were not being heard, they were being silenced, they were being ignored, they were being arrested in some cases.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe the gauntlet that got thrown down was when the National School Board Association reached out to Merrick Garland and asked for federal law enforcement investigations into parents that were attending their school board meeting, equating them to domestic terrorists. It was like, what is going on here? So
wait a second.
That was in my world at that time. I had young kids, and I was really concerned with some of the decisions that were being made, and partially around COVID restrictions, and then partially around sort of a ideological creep that we were noticing in policy. At least I noticed that in my home district, and I was noticing that it was being done without any community input, right? So the policy that I was most concerned about was passed in a summer meeting. Nobody knew it was happening. Nobody attended that meeting. There wasn't a discussion about it. There wasn't like a survey that went out. And it was a big deal. And so that was my moment where I realized it doesn't seem like they really want our input. And that's a problem, because you entrust these individuals to make choices for your children.
And you don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist when they're coming after parents, but all of a sudden it starts to trigger something in your mind. Now, you're part of Minnesota Parents Association.
Yep. So as a result of all that, I realized, and I saw people run for school board, and they lost because they were up against this like very forceful incumbent, usually an incumbent, or somebody with a lot of name recognition that usually had a union endorsement behind them. And it was like a no contest in some districts. And so I realized that there has to be a mechanism of support for really invested, engaged parents. I think there's such goodness that can come of parents being involved in their kids' education. We need that. And seeing people just feel really like discouraged, and they either got their kids out of school, some of them left the public school system and never came back. Those were some of the most invested, involved, wonderful people that you would want to be part of your school community, and they were so frustrated by what was going on, they were walking out the door. So I realized we can't afford this. We need those people to be part of our school community. So I created Minnesota Parents Alliance with the idea that if we can create a mechanism of support for parents who either want to run for their local school board or just want to become more aware and involved and become advocates in their local school community, they need to have a mechanism of support behind them to do that, and also to know that they're not alone. So we started this organization in spring of 2022. A big piece of what we were offering at that time was some campaign training for people who wanted to run in their local school district as a school board candidate to execute a successful campaign. There was never really any sort of training for people. They would wait until the filing period in August to run for an election that was happening in November. And so there was just a lot of organization that needed to come around that piece of it. And then the other thing that we identified is voter education. Nobody ever knew who was running for school board. I know I didn't, right? You look at these people at the bottom of the ballot, and unless you recognize them or you like went to high school with them or something, you're like, who are these people? So we needed to make sure that voters were aware that our initiative that is achievement focused, trying to put people in these seats that are going to focus on achievement and equality for all students and parental rights, that those are the candidates that they're most interested in voting for. They need to know who those candidates are. So we created a voter guide that was really successful. We were able to place many candidates in seats in 2022 as a result of putting that voter guide into the public. And people were so grateful for it. They're like, finally, there's a resource that we can try to, help discern who are all these people running. Because sometimes you have like 10 people running for 3 seats. You don't know any of them. They don't have websites. It's really hard to get information about them. Sometimes there's like a candidate forum, but sometimes there isn't.
There's the vaguest of like descriptions of them. So it's like, I went to school and my background is education. And you're like, okay, that person sounds great.
And a lot of them are great too. And I think that's what's really hard is like a lot of these people, you have to have a real servant heart, I believe, to want to be in these local elected offices. And so, there are people that are like, well, I'm a great volunteer, I'm an incumbent, and I've served the district really well, so I deserve your vote again. And it's really hard to tease out what the nuances are of their position. And a lot of times there weren't people that were door knocking for school board races. And so you wouldn't get to have that one-on-one time that you might get with a legislative candidate or somebody else who might come to knock at your door. So all that said, we had a great success doing both the training and the voter guide in 2022. And as a result of that, now currently, we did that in 2022. We just did that this last round in 2023. There were fewer elections in those odd years, but the ones that there were are incredibly important. They're some of the biggest districts in the metro area. The Anoka-Hennepin race was a big one. And so doing that now, we have over 90 current seated serving school board members in our cohort that meets regularly. It's a huge win, and that really represents a sea change, I believe, that's happening in the K-12 space, because you have now invested, organized parents that have been organized. They know what to do. They can campaign effectively. They get their message out. People are now looking for our voter guide, so they know that like this sort of initiative is something that they can get behind, and it really is a challenge to the status quo that has been failing our children. The most disturbing part of everything that's happening in education right now is just the incredible decline in achievement.
Yes,
sub 50% of kids are proficient at math and reading, and that's not just Minneapolis; it's statewide, and it's without many exceptions that I can think of. If you look over a 10-year trend, there is dramatic decline in almost every district. I struggle to identify any district that has really even seen a significant uptick, certainly since COVID. So that's a real problem. And I think that when we think about what are our public schools for, if we're not getting that piece right, what are we doing? What is all this money for? What is all this time that we're investing into our students? What are we doing with that? So that's really, those are the questions we're trying to raise. That's kind of what we want people to start thinking about and examining. And as they discern who to put in local school board seats, as they think about what's going on at our state legislature, as they're looking at, what is going on with federal policy around education, it's really important to try to identify where the mission creep is and how we start to just narrow our focus back into student achievement.
Absolutely. And school board, I'll even tack on city council, some of those county races, they get lost in those big elections. And this year we have president, we have a Senate race up, we have all our congressional districts. Our state legislators.
I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned. So, the odd year elections are kind of great because that's like the only thing on the ballot in a lot of districts. But this year, it's going to be chaotic. There's a lot going on. And I think that's even more of a reason why parents right now in this moment in late February should be identifying who are strong people in your local community that would be interested in running for school board. Don't ask them once, ask them 20 times until they say yes, because it's so critical to have really good people in these seats. And if you're ever not convinced, like I think a lot of people think, well, like what can I really do? It's a school board seat. And a lot of, unfortunately, I think a lot of the training that new members get sort of implies that it's like, well, the superintendent is like kind of the person that knows the most about education, so you should really defer to them. And as a school board member, you really have to just kind of be, unanimous in your voting with your fellow board members and really support the superintendent. You don't have that much power.
But that's not a republic.
It's false. If you ever need to be convinced that the school board seat is a powerful, powerful position, look at how much money Education Minnesota will spend trying to keep parents off of school boards. They wouldn't be spending, $500,000 in an odd year if that weren't a very powerful position that they want to hang on to. So,
on a local election.
Yes, local elections matter very, very much. And they, here in Minnesota, have full control over policy and curriculum. Yes, there are some state mandates that they're going to need to work around or work with. But at the end of the day, policy and curriculum is largely set by those 6 or 7 members that are locally elected.
And we're seeing, you touched on literacy, we're just seeing failing grades. We come from a state where they boast about education. We have people who go through higher education like it's nothing. we can't even get our kids through reading, through writing, you know, the basics.
And I think the question is, why is that, right? Because we did formerly, I think, get that right, or we had been doing significantly better than we are now. If you grew up in Minnesota and you went to Minnesota public schools, you know that because you lived it. You probably got a great public education, went on to whatever post-secondary dream you had. And I think right now, when you look at children who are just struggling to meet basic level math and reading, what is their future? And why is it that we aren't meeting that mark? And from my perspective and studying what's going on in K-12 education, it's really just a matter of priorities. There's a finite number of minutes in the day for instruction, so that's the time perspective, and there is a finite amount of money, despite what many people think, in the budget to allocate toward educating these children. So we have to look at how are we spending our teaching time during the day, and how are we spending the money in our budget and making sure that every moment of time and every penny in the budget is directed at achievement. Because student outcomes, that is the only thing that matters, arguably. And I think that we have, unfortunately, put adults in the seats that have their adult interests that they are prioritizing over student outcomes. And so we're really trying with this cohort now of newly elected members, people who are aligned with our organization, to almost sort of redefine the role of a school board member is your one and only responsibility is to prioritize student outcomes. And how are you measuring that? How are you quantifying it? When you're taking millions and millions of dollars to be spent on education, how do you measure whether you're being successful in your goal? And if you're adopting programs and policies and all of these different things that are very expensive endeavors, both from a time and money perspective, and you don't have the achievement to show for that, we got to find something else to do with that time and money, then it's not working. So I think putting people in seats that are willing to ask those questions, even if they're not on a majority of people on their board that think that way or are approaching it that way, they can start asking those questions. They can do it in a public meeting, and they can start bringing awareness to this. And I think when community members hear those, one or two people on their school board asking those questions, they get really excited and encouraged that, yes, that's the kind of leadership we need. We would like more of that. So we're trying to now identify candidates that want to run, that are going to bring more of that to the board.
And we want to get to the most basic children, the children who probably grow up in hard circumstances, whether poverty, just their, situation, family going on. We want to make sure they achieve, their goals too. We want to see them grow up in the same America. All of us have had that chance to grow up.
Education is the great equalizer, and that is fully true. And I think that we are affording all children, and I would argue equally, that opportunity. We are gifting that to the children, that they have a right, I think. I believe public education should be a right of all children to be accessed. And I think that, there's nothing that can be taken away from you. When you have your education, nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah.
So whatever they go on to do in their lives, if we've equipped them at the K-12 level, they can go out into the world and know that they have that foundation. They have those skills that they need to be in the world. And so I think that is one of the most heartbreaking things, is now we are seeing, because there has been many years of decline, there are individuals who are graduating out of our K-12 system that are functionally illiterate.
Yeah.
And they don't have the skills that they need to achieve their dreams. And I think that is the up and coming mental health crisis. I believe strongly that right now our children are in a mental health crisis for a variety of different reasons. But I am very fearful that that is the up and coming mental health crisis, is when young adults go out into the world and realize that they're not employable and they can't achieve their dreams. They can't provide for their family because they were failed by our K-12 system. So
and they're going to look at a world of AI. They're going to look at a world where computers are taking over some of those more basic jobs. That's just going to create that, exponential growth of.
They need to have adults come alongside them in their young years, though, and raise a standard. Because I think right now there has been this degradation of standards across the board and lower expectations, continually lowering our expectations for these kids. And if you have children, if you interact with children, when you set a high expectation for those children and you come alongside them to help them meet that expectation because you know they can, that vote of confidence means the world. It is the difference between success and failure, and they will strive to meet those high expectations. And so I think that we have to stop shying away from really going above and beyond and raising expectations even further than maybe we think that, that they can meet that mark, because there has to be a goal to strive for. And I think that that's really important, just even psychologically, for our kids to know that the adults in their life believe in them and they will work as hard as they can to come alongside them and meet those goals.
Absolutely. Candidate training. I've never run for school board, but having run as a candidate there's so much to learn, even in a city race. I've ran for park board in Minneapolis.
There is. We're a statewide organization, and so we equip people who live in teeny tiny rural towns where the game is a lot different than if you live in a big metro area district. But the pieces are the same in the sense that you need to know what you're running on. You have to have your why, and you have to be able to communicate that to your voters. So we offer a campaign school. We're going to do that in March this year. It's March 16th is our first full day of training for anybody who wants to come and bring your team, bring your kitchen cabinet of volunteers and people who are going to help you really learn all the components of a successful campaign. We're going to do, I hope, a second one in May. So that'll be building onto what we've talked about in March, but also an opportunity for people who didn't catch the March one to kind of jump in. And we have a lot of other resources in the interim. So if anybody wants to run, they should contact us. We have our info at Minnesota Parents at our website. Just contact us, and we will get you up to speed with what you need to know. And I'm very into personal customized service. I will personally come to you if I need to get you up to speed and give you all the information so that you can launch successfully and launch early. Because the number one thing that candidates who don't win will tell us, if I only started earlier. I was just so close, and if I could have had a couple more weekends to door knock, or if I could have had a few more opportunities to get my message out, I really think I could have won. Nobody wants to feel that way. So start earlier than you think you need to. You will need that time, and it's really important to make that contact.
Yeah, just having, like I said, having been in that seat, it is so confusing if no one is there to explain that. So when you talked to me about that, I was just so excited that you take these people running for what you think is a basic race. You think, okay, I'm going to put my hat on the race. Like you said, you have to get involved early, but
this is also a nonpartisan race. So for viewers at home here, it's nonpartisan. School boards are nonpartisan, and I believe education is nonpartisan. Our organization is nonpartisan. I even cringe a little that I'm sitting here at the Republican roundtable conversation because I would love to be invited to a DFL roundtable conversation. I don't think that we have, any sort of position that is politically polarizing or should be. But I unfortunately believe if you're an achievement-focused candidate that's going to challenge what I think is a fairly regressive left status quo, you're going to be labeled a conservative whether you want to be or not. Unfortunately, because it's a nonpartisan race, you aren't necessarily going to automatically get some sort of support mechanism in the form of a party endorsement, or you see that a lot with legislative races, and there are campaign teams that kind of come together around the fact that you're a partisan candidate. This is a fully organic, grassroots, nonpartisan initiative, and so you're going to have to find people in your own local community that maybe are not partisan creatures that are going to come out and support you. And I really encourage our candidates to, actually it's interesting, there was a gentleman who ran in Anoka Hennepin, and one of the things he told me was that he believes he won his race, and I believe he won his race too, because he deliberately door knocked doors that he knew were not maybe ideologically or politically aligned with him, and had those conversations. And I think he won a lot of hearts and minds because he's on the right side of issues that matter to people. And our whole organization is about centrist leadership. We don't believe that the answer of, we're seeing, I think, a very hard swing to the left in sort of policy and curriculum in our schools. I don't believe that the answer to that is the opposite, the equal but opposite hard swing to the right. It's centrist leadership because our public schools are for everyone. I believe that there is a real need for people who can come to the table, and they're going to represent people that they don't necessarily politically or ideologically align with, but their challenge is to make the right policy, to set the right policy, and choose the right curriculum that is going to be acceptable and help all students of all backgrounds.
Absolutely, and I even take a school board member. I don't care what president they vote for. I just want to see them do their job as a school board member, making sure our schools are safe and they're
and that's how we should feel about our children. I think that I've done some reading in elementary schools too, and it's I don't care who their parents voted for, and I don't care what their positions are. I want to help that student read, and that's how we want our teachers to view students. That's how we want our school board to view the families that they serve. You need to push politics aside because I think, again, our public schools are really a diverse group of people, and the main goal is achievement. So if we can stay centered there, we don't need to debate the culture war issues and all of those things because it's not important to the mission at hand, which is achievement.
Exactly, especially when it comes to city council, school board, some of those basic, park board. It's about that board you serve on, not who's who's running the country.
And it's very unique, and that is why they are called independent school districts for a reason, because what is right for a district in Minneapolis area, Twin Cities area, is not right for someplace way up in northern Minnesota. They're very different communities with very different needs. So it's really important that we maintain that local control, and you should be watching at the legislature to make sure that that isn't eroded in any way, because I think that's one of the benefits of our system is that we get to make local independent choices.
Now, you talked about giving parents that voice, giving them that information. Just quickly touch on that. What has your alliance done for that?
Yeah, so we like to create parent advocacy groups. I think that's the most powerful driver of change. And so it doesn't really matter who's sitting in the school board seats as much as it matters the parents. Are they engaged? Are they coming to meetings? Are they listening to what's being voted? Are you looking at the agenda? Like, do you know what's going on in your school? So we're trying to empower and equip parents to start, their own district-specific parent groups. Groups that meet on the regular, groups that have, a monthly meeting where they invite teachers and they invite other stakeholders to a conversation about what do we see for our K-12 system here in district whatever. What are our goals? And that way they can approach the board and put pressure on the board to listen to them. A lot of times, I don't care if it's a local official or if it's, a federal, legislator, they don't know what they don't know unless you tell them. So it's really important that if you are well educated on an issue that affects your child, your family, you let your elected official know that, because they probably don't know that. How would they? So I really encourage these parent advocacy groups to get, very in touch on a regular basis with the people that represent them, whether it's their local school board or people in St. Paul or people in Washington, D.C. Let them know what's important to you. And so we're trying to equip parents with, that sort of a structure to try to create those parent groups. I think advocacy groups are very important. And we're also trying to help people be proactive. There are a lot of trends nationally that we haven't even really fully seen develop in Minnesota, but we can pretty much predict that they're going to come. If you see something that's happened in California, there's a good chance that it's coming here. And we saw that with the ethnic studies curriculum. That has been a total train wreck, in my opinion, and we could have seen it coming. We did see it coming, and I think there were certain people in the education policy world here in Minnesota that tried to raise the red flag and show people, like, this is not good and here's why. We saw what was going on in California, and I think that if there was more of just a local education effort, we might have been able to be more proactive in preventing, I think, what are some significant harms that are going to come from revising our social studies standards and the ethnic studies push that we're seeing in Minnesota. Some upcoming trends are community schools. We're seeing those being implemented elsewhere in the country, but we also here in Minnesota have schools that are already on the path to full service community schools. That is an initiative, and we won't have time to cover it in this show. Look into it, because it's not what you think it is. And I think that a lot of these educational trends sound good on the surface. And once you start peeling back the layers and really asking questions about what would this look like if it were implemented, there's some significant concerns. Community schools are a model where they want to have mental health care facilities, physical health care facilities, a variety of different services provided for students in-house. There are a lot of, I believe, significant concerns that parents need to be aware of. The money's there, it's happening, the train's leaving the station, so it's something that parents should educate themselves on. Same thing with media literacy. The Media Literacy Project is another one. California passed a law that is going into effect right now in January of this year, and the Media Literacy Project is another thing that sounds kind of good. It's about, combating against disinformation and how do you find a credible media source, but the NGOs that run these programs, like that one in particular, is fully run by legacy media, or like the media giants, so it's like MSNBC, like the New York Times, the Washington Post. So they're saying we're the only credible sources, and we're going to start teaching kids that unless their information comes from one of these curated sources, it's invalid, it's dangerous, it's disinformation. So that will become part of policy and curriculum in our districts if we're not aware of that and if we don't proactively have that information so that we can guard against it.
It sounds like those Facebook warnings that tells me something is false news or fake.
I think independent journalism will be the most important thing that our children need to access to be critical thinkers. So we ought not be telling them that they should only be getting their information from certain sources.
Yeah, you have to build it. And even I, as somebody who sits on Republican Roundtable, I tend to vote more conservative. I'll look at different sources, including MSNBC or including something more local that tends to be liberal, because I want to get to the story, not just to what
There's a lot to pay
everyone's telling me.
attention to, and not to overwhelm parents either.
Yes.
You know, I think if you do nothing else, if you take nothing away from, you know, this conversation or anything else that's being discussed in education, get involved in your local community.
Yes.
Find candidates that you trust to represent you and your family and your interests. Make sure that you're in touch with your state legislator, even if you don't, if you know that they're completely politically and ideologically different than you. Humanize yourself to them. Reach out to them. Let them know what's important to you, because that is really the only way that we're going to fix this, is with an informed and engaged citizenry at the local level and up.
Yep, and I was just going to touch on what conviewers do, but you touched on it. You know, get involved at the local level. Local politics matter sometimes way more than national politics.
Yes.
Presidential campaigns, our
100%.
presidential elections, they're exciting, they're interesting.
I think your school board candidate should be more interesting to you than the President of the United States of America. It will impact your family in ways, especially if you have young children,
Yes.
in much more direct ways than what's happening in our federal government.
Yes. How can viewers get a hold of your organization?
Our website is minnesotaparents.org. Our info@minnesotaparents.org is just our catch-all inbox. You can email us about anything. We get a lot of tips from people about things that are going on in their school that's concerning. Sometimes that's how we find out about things. Certainly from teachers, they utilize that a lot. A lot of times they don't feel like they want to be public with their concerns, but we're able to know what's going on in districts through that tool. There's a lot on our website. There are ways that you can educate yourself on opting your kids out of curriculum that you're uncomfortable with. We have a lot of instructional videos on how to start parent groups, how to run for school board. So if you don't know where to start, email us and say, this is me, I live in this district, and I don't know where to start, and we'll help you.
And you or somebody will get back to
It
them.
will probably be me.
I was like, this is just something you've taken on, and you are fully committed.
Yeah, no, it is on my heart now that I think that we have to step into this, and we meaning me. For me, I do, but I think every parent needs to figure out where their point of engagement is and fight hard, because I think this is truly our country and our future rests with K-12 education, and what is going on in our schools is going to matter, and that's going to be what's going on in our government.
Absolutely.
In the future.
Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Any last words for our viewers?
Go get involved. That's all I can say, is that we need strong candidates, we need strong parents, and the kids are watching. So do this knowing that you're modeling how to be a good citizen and how to get involved when things are broken, how to fix them for your own kids.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Republican Roundtable. Until next time.